Greetings, everyone. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us for this evening, and which I'm anticipating to be a very lively and rich discussion of faith, the Black Church, and social justice. Um, the Black Church. I just want to say a couple of words, very quickly. The Black Church has a long history of serving as the rock of the Black community. Our adaptation of the Christian religion and shaping it to our needs sustained us through some of the darkest times. There is no other singular institution that has sustained the Black community as deeply and significantly as the church. And although the church hasn't been involved in every fight for justice in this country, it has certainly provided the moral framework from the rebellions of Nat Turner to the prophetic vision of Dr. Martin Luther King. And we know that the fight for social justice is a long way from complete. So our conversation tonight is to bring this discussion home and talk about faith, the Black church, and social justice as it exists, and we're envisioning it in our community, in our city, and in our region. So this is the space where we can make a difference, our local community, and we can have an impact. So we have a panel of faith leaders who are going to share their thoughts about all of this. And before I turn it over to Charlotte Pfeiffer, who's co-hosting with me tonight, I just wanted to encourage everyone to a couple of housekeeping things. That we're asking everyone to please keep your video off and mute your microphone so that we won't be distracted from our panelists and our speakers. We're going to take questions from you, the audience. We're gonna have a discussion for a little bit, and then we're gonna open it up to questions. So put your questions in the chat as they come, or you can wait till the very end. And so with that, I'm gonna turn this over to Charlotte.
Thank you, Daryl. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. We know that there are a lot of things you could be doing, and we're really pleased that you'll share this time with us. South Bend is a wonderful community, as we all know, and we have a lot of people that are involved with various levels of social justice, faith, and the Black church. And my very good friend, Barbara Williams, a couple of months ago brought to my attention that Henry Louis Gates, Skip Gates, was going to have this program on, and we were showing it on our local WNIT. I hope you all had a chance to look at it. If you didn't, you can still see it. And she also thought, wouldn't it be nice if we continued that conversation through our Civil Rights Heritage Center? So then we got a hold of Daryl and George, and the four of us met, and we talked about what would be the best way, the most productive way of carrying on this conversation. Well, we know that we have several topics going on, and we're going to be sharing those topics. But also, if you'll think about it, the last 4 years, I think we've all had various discussions about how maybe some members of the faith community kind of put the family values aside and focused on single issues. And that kind of brings us all to where are we going from here with COVID and with the murders and with all the different things. So we couldn't think of any better people to address those issues than you all. So thank you again. So it is my honor and pleasure to point out a couple of people, and they'll tell you a little bit about themselves and their church and their involvement in the community. So I'll start out with Pastor Clavel Hunter, the pastor of Berean Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Hello, everyone. I am Clavel Hunter, the pastor of the Berean Seventh-day Adventist Church right here in South Bend, Indiana. I am a minister of the Gospel of Christ. I am a Christian, an activist, an advocate for social justice and equity for all. I am a son, a brother, a husband, and a father, and I'm a Black man in America. And what I love about my church at Berean, I've just been there about 11 months now. We formulate a mission and a vision. We did our SWOT analysis, and our mission is to empower our members to love and serve one another and our community through worship, outreach, relationship, and discipleship. And our vision is to be an inclusive, vibrant body of believers who are actively engaged in life-transforming ministry. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Pastor Clavel. Now we're going to go on to Deacon Mel Tardy, who is with St. Augustine Catholic Church. Mel?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this wonderful panel. I'm Deacon Mel Tardy at St. Augustine's Catholic Church on West Washington Street. And I think sometimes people, when they think Black church, they might not think of Catholics, but there are Black Catholics. And I'm originally from New Orleans, and there are a lot of us down there. And I think that one of the things that I'm really excited about in being included is that the documentary, for all of the great things that it covered, it did not touch on the Catholic experience with African Americans. So that's something that at St. Augustine's Parish, we've been around since 1928. We're a diverse parish, we're a mixed parish, but we certainly have our gospel choir, and we have our attention on social justice issues, particularly as they affect the African American community. So I look forward to sharing a bit more about that as we go forward.
Thank you, Mel.
And just I should also add, as a deacon, sometimes people think that they don't realize that in the Catholic Church, the deacons can be married. So I'm clergy, but I am married. And my wonderful wife, Annie, is watching. So thank you, Annie.
Thank you. And I'll move on to Pastor Eileen Thomas, who is pastor of Olivet AME Church. And welcome, Pastor Thomas.
Thank you so much for the invite. I am Eileen Thomas, and I am pastor of Olivet AME Church in South Bend. I've been there 3 years. I've been in pastoring for 23 years. We are reaching beyond the walls, moving into a new congregation, and it takes a while to get to know each other, but we're growing to know each other, and our goal is to get more into the community and allow the love of Christ through our lives to draw people to him.
Thank you, Pastor. I'm going to move on to Pastor Ricardo Taylor, who is the pastor of Mount Carmel Missionary Baptist Church. Pastor Taylor.
How you doing, everybody? Thanks for inviting me also. Pastor Ricardo Taylor, I've been pastor of Mount Carmel for 21 years now. Our mission statement is to affect the world one by one. Our goal is to make a difference. And so our church is not known by how much we take in, but how much we give out. And so we want to be givers to enrich our community. And so my assignment is to stir up people's spirit to be used for the glory of God. And that's what we try to do every Sunday. And in this day and time, I'm pastoring a different type of church that has to be more virtual and changing times. And so this is a real unique time for any pastor that's pastoring right now to be vibrant and reverent and being very much alive in this day and time. So thanks for letting me be part of this panel.
Thank you, Pastor Taylor. And just like Deacon Tardy said, that program didn't talk much about Black Catholics, but as you look around the world, Black people are everywhere. And so we're everywhere. And so a lot of people don't realize it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Marvin Curtis, who's the musical director at St. Michael's Episcopal Church. And Marvin.
Thank you, Charlotte, and good evening, everyone. I am Marvin Curtis. I'm the recently retired dean at the Ernestine and Brackman School of the Arts at IU South Bend and have been a church musician for almost 60 years. I started when I was about 11 years old playing for churches in Chicago. I've played all over the country, so I've heard many sermons. I have a master's degree in Christian education on top of that. So I've studied. I'm also a composer and a music director and conduct the symphonic choir, but I'm also the music director at St. Michael's and All Angels Episcopal Church on Ironwood, where I am one of a few of the Black people in the congregation. But I've had the honor and the privilege, thanks to the pastor, of giving a sermon at the church on several occasions, in which I talk about Black issues and have brought forth, this last sermon was on false prophets, and talked about the political side of being a Christian. So I'm glad to be here to give my input, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Dean Curtis. You'll always be Dean Curtis to me.
Thank you,
Yeah, and
Thank you.
last but not least, I'd like to introduce Pastor James McConnell, who's the pastor of the Unitarian Church in Berrien Springs, I believe. And Pastor McConnell, your church is the only one I've not been in. I've been in all the rest of them. So I'm delighted to meet you this evening.
Well, you certainly are welcome, Charlotte, if you ever want to drop in. Pretty easy by Zoom. Yeah, my name is Jim McConnell. I'm a minister of Berrien Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We live on the doorstep of St. Joe, Michigan, and we're right next to Benton Harbor. So a lot of our ministry has been in the Benton Harbor area. We are a humanist congregation, and our goal is to create authentic human beings who can live their greatest possible lives so that they can go out and make a difference in the world. And there's lots of room to make a difference in the world we live in today. So thank you all for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to my partner, Dr. Daryl Heller.
Great, thank you, Charlotte, and thank you to each and every one of our panelists. I have the first question I want to pose, and it's really centering around a lot of the work that's been happening here in South Bend around police reform. So as you know, the Black Lives Matter movement grew out of a response to police brutality and the senseless killing of unarmed Black people by the police and other white people who've taken the law into their own hands. After many years of struggle and too many who have lost their lives at the end of white supremacist bullets, we're at a place where discussions of police reform is actually happening. South Bend now has a community police review board, a revised and ongoing revision of the police use of force policy, and a vibrant Black Lives Matter movement. Many ideas are being floated to find alternatives to the harms besides arresting and locking up people, including things like restorative justice and community interventionists and social workers and others who can respond when harms happen in the community. So my question is, do you think there's a role for the church in the efforts to create new ways of keeping our community safe that don't necessarily involve the police? And where do each of you see yourselves in your church in this movement?
Well, Daryl, I'll jump in on that one if I could. Yeah, I think the church had a huge role in that. It's in my opinion that for the last 400 years, our American society has been marinating in racism, and that racism is a part of our genetic DNA. So the church, I think, is the one place where we can reach more people to help people evolve to acquire greater consciousness and to understand that racism is a part of almost everyone's cultural DNA in this country. And understanding that, I think, is crucial in beginning to reform the police and reform other elements of society.
I think also, Daryl, that the church has to remind people of the history of why it came into being in the first place. The police came into being in the first place through the advent of slavery. That the laws of slavery back in the 1600s in this country violated the lives of Africans who were here enslaved. And those laws have been a part of that ever since. However, the church also has a role, and I've seen this happen, where we have to create avenues for our young people to allow them to have access to education, access to recreation, and to provide a place where they can go when times are tough, when times are good. I grew up in Chicago, and we spent a lot of time in the church, not in service, but in activities. And many churches still have those activities where you can go on a Saturday night, Friday night, any night of the week, be open, just to come in, talk, sit, be involved in choirs or whatever, basketball, football. And I think we have a role, the church has a role in providing some of that, because the government's not going to do it. We already know that. And the church has to step in and become not only the church, but the mother, the father, the sister, the brother to the people in our communities.
I agree. I agree with that. When I look at the study, study shows that more than 1,000 people are killed by police every year in America, and Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed than white people. And just like COVID-19, it is evident that the killing of unarmed Black people is an urgent public health crisis. And as a father, I say enough is enough. And I want to make sure that my children, our children, regardless of the color, we want them to breathe without a knee of racism and injustice strangling our brothers and sisters. And so, as a church, regardless of one's color or creed, nationality or background, it is our human and civil duty to speak out against discrimination, racism, injustice, and oppression. And so we got to be proactive and not reactive.
I totally agree with the gentleman, but I think one of the roles that we can do as pastors, one, we have to continue to teach the importance of love and trust, and then we have to build this relationship. I think one of the things I can do is build a relationship with the captain of the police force and invite them into our parishes, into our congregation, not so much in uniform, but let them start coming around us, because I think a lot of problem is police are afraid, and they're afraid of us that's being kissed by Mother Nature. Mm-hmm. And so their first response is to think that we're wanting to hurt or harm. And so we need to let them understand our culture, our neighborhoods, our goals, and we need to build a relationship where they know us and we know them. One of the things about growing up in communities like South Bend and in small cities, people know each other's family. And so that goes a long way. We have a lot of time in our communities, we're bringing in police that don't know nothing about our community, don't know nothing about our culture. And so their first response is that from what they see in the news, that we're harmful or we're dangerous. And so my goal is to talk to our police chief and say, hey, you need to come visit us on Sunday morning. And if I can get my congregation saved and get some of them saved, then we can cut down some of the violence, I believe.
Pastor Thomas, do you want to add anything to that, what's been said?
I certainly agree with what has been said. I feel that the Black church needs to be more visible, if I could say it that way. So when things happen, we can be kind of in the middle with us knowing the police and then knowing our neighborhood, that we can help to take out some of the tension and build the love and the peace instead of tearing down, because hurt people will respond in a negative way. And so if we can be more, be out there in the middle, I think will help take some of the tension off.
One of the things I do, I have 2 sons. And so I teach my sons, first of all, let's live to tell the story, and don't put yourself in a position, and be conscious about what you do while you're out. Be careful where you find yourself. Just understand your upbringing of knowing your morals and integrity. Don't put yourself in a position where you're second guess, where police will challenge you. And if you're ever put in a position where when an officer is challenging you, make sure I'm on the phone with you, or actually go to a lighted area and just listen to what they say. Don't break the rule, but keep your hands where they need to be seen. And so I think we have to, like Marvin said, we have to educate our kids, having programs for our kids, teach our kids. And then I say, with me as a leader, I make that relationship grow between who's ever in charge of police or leaders of the city, to let them understand that we are very valuable individuals within this community to help make a difference. That we're not killers. That we're just surviving to be good citizens.
Mm-hmm.
I see the role of the church as at least in my role, in twofold. One is I do a lot with youth ministry and doing things in the community with youth. And when Black Lives Matter first started in the wake of what happened with
Eric Logan.
George Zimmerman and then also with Michael Brown and things like that, we met with our youth to talk to them about what you should do if you're stopped by the police, so that they would understand what they needed to do. But we heard from them, and this is something that's important, we started to hear the stories that they were talking about that they hadn't shared, about how the police were harassing them, following them around, bumping them with the police cars. They said, we just want to let you know that we know that you're here. And picking them up and saying, well, I thought that this was something that we were looking for somebody, and it was a description of a man. It was a 12-year-old boy who was put in the back of a police car and brought home to his mother. So listening to those stories and reaffirming the humanity of these young men, because they're young. So I think part of it is we have to be in a position where we have relationships with our youth and with our families, so we can sort of detox some of those things that are going on, but not that, and teach them love, that they should not hate police, or they should not, paint everybody with the same brush just because there are some people who are treating them a certain way. The other side of it is that dealing with folks in the Catholic Church who have this tendency to, when things happen like this, they will build up the police, because the police are they're seen as they to serve and protect, and they can do no wrong. But the folks in the African American community, or in the Latino community, or brown communities, they're being given names like maggots and infestations and things like that, and really not getting a chance to understand the humanity of our community. And so we have to be that prophetic witness that goes and talks to folks and lets them know, look, I'm sitting down with sat down with a lot of folks throughout our diocese to tell them, look, this is what's happening with our youth. And I share those stories that the youth share with me. I share the stories the families share with me. But I talk to them and listen to them and walk and meet with some of the police officers who are there, who talk about their side of things, and say, look, we have to come together. We have to have we have to talk. We have to have we have to promote relationship building, and we have to have love. Big society was set up with systemic racism, and the more that we can humanize each other, the more we can make things safer for everyone.
Yeah, you're muted.
I just said Jim. No, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think now my congregation is primarily white. In fact, it's all white, and so I feel like we have a responsibility to learn how to talk to other white people. I had a gentleman the other day tell me that systemic racism was an idea that MSNBC cooked up to denigrate America, so we spent some time doing that, learning how to talk to our white brothers and sisters and friends and political opponents about the whole issue of systemic racism, for one, and also, as I said, the idea that racism is pretty much a universal part of our cultural DNA, which is an important thing that we're going to have to know if we're ever going to dig ourselves out of the current hole we are in. I'd just like to add that I know a few people over at St. Augustine's, Deacon Tardy, and I have to say, I've never been in the church, but you've got a lot of great people over there.
I would agree with that. Thank you.
Daryl, can I also add, we're in a political climate that is designed to keep Black and brown people down. And we're seeing it now with the voter suppression laws in various states. That affects all of us. And until people begin to understand that it's not a white or Black issue, it's a human issue. And the church has to become that human issue. We have so long been a separate issue. Certain congregations believe certain things. And unfortunately, a lot of congregations, particularly white congregations, have become so political that they believe only one side of the story. And so the church has to re-embrace not the political conservative side, but has to embrace the Jesus side, which I would call, which is the side of listening and love, but also understanding. We have to hear each other. And we have so many preconcepts about who Black people are, how brown people are. And it's because of the politics that has come forward. Here we have a bill right now, the George Floyd policing bill, and a filibuster may stop that bill from becoming law. The bill was passed last year, and the majority leader at the time stuck it in a drawer away so it couldn't pass. So that means that the church, in a sense, has to become a political animal as well and put the right people in place. Our congregations have to vote for people that will do the right thing, not for their political expediency. And people have to start understanding the other side of the story. I'm very proud that when I gave the sermon at St. Michael's, people came up to me and said, we had those experiences as a Black man. Because they don't live those experiences. We have to tell those experiences. People have to listen to those experiences, so that when you go to the polls, that you don't vote, that you vote to put people in place to make the change, not to put people in place to keep yourself safe and secure in your own little circle.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Reverend Taylor.
And I don't think this is just up to the African American church. This is the church, the body of Christ.
Oh yeah.
That we have to stop talking about the cross, but we got to be the cross. The cross is about love. Yeah. And so that cross is not just our congregation. That's my white brothers that are pastoring church, my Jewish brothers. It's all of our responsibility to speak out when there's something wrong that's taking place in humanity. And so in our society. And so I think that's all of our responsibility as Christians. He changed our heart to love people.
Yeah.
And I think that since those of us who preach have opportunity to do that from the pulpit, that when there's an issue that comes up and we don't address it, that means that people feel that the church is not involved. Mm-hmm. So there are times when I'm preaching, and I think my pastor was on, actually, Father Lynn Collins, who allows me to preach from time to time regularly, actually. And so we touch on some of these difficult issues, looking at it and from different racial perspectives, because we do have a mixed parish. And sometimes it's uncomfortable for people to hear these things, but we have a lot of conversation, when we're not in the pandemic and we're meeting afterwards over food and stuff. But we talk about these things, and that's what's really important. I'm sorry, Daryl.
That's great, thank you. Because I think that's a good segue. I'm going to turn it over to Charlotte for the next question.
Okay.
Hello. So many of you know that I've been teaching at the university level probably for 40 years. And I've taught in 5 different departments at IU South Bend and at Ivy Tech, but all of them have something to do with social justice and diversity. I believe that the only difficult conversation is the conversation we don't have. So I just want you to know that. So we've had the hashtag Me Too movement. We've got hashtag Black Lives Matter. And in 2015, the Supreme Court made the motion that gay people could be married. And so my question to you all is, what is the role? Is there a role for the faith community, the Black church, in social justice matters as it pertains to our gay, trans, lesbian, gay brothers and sisters?
I think, let me add, to those who are part of, that community, they're looking for equality, and they long to serve God and connect with other Christians and be a part of a wider community. And they want a safe place. They want to belong, and they want to find that community where they're able to grow in their relationship with God. And so as a church, we must recognize that every human being is valuable in the sight of God, and we are called to minister to all people in the spirit of Christ. We got to show love, show compassion, be willing to do life with individuals, even those who do not line up with our beliefs. And we cannot turn people away. It's the work of God to transform lives. He called us just to be fishers of men.
Yes, Pastor McConnell?
Yeah, my church, the Berrien Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, we were the first church in Berrien County to become an open, welcoming, and affirming congregation for LGBTQ people. And I have to say that LGBTQ people have been a great addition to our congregation, and in terms of bringing love and art and creativity to us. So I'm thankful for our ministry to the LGBTQ community. We also work with the Out Center up there too, and I don't know if you probably don't know of it, but it's for that community, because as you probably know, not all elements of society are welcoming to the LGBTQ folks.
Pastor Taylor?
I actually agree with Pastor Hunter. I think our responsibility is to love. One of the things the church has done wrong, we magnify certain sins and make them bigger than other sins. Sins are sins. And so our assignment is to allow the Holy Spirit to transform people's minds and transform people's heart. And our job is to preach the word of God. Our assignment is to show the love of Christ. And so we all gonna have difference when we believe in what scripture says, and so this is a great topic. And so some of my belief is we as a church need to preach the gospel, and it'll do the rest of the job.
Others? Anyone else?
Okay, go ahead.
Look ahead, Pastor, go ahead.
What is sad, for those who have, who are in this community, many churches have turned them away, and many of them have turned away from the faith, as a means of just self preservation, and that hurts. I just think of the woman caught in adultery there in John chapter 8, and how the religious people dragged her through the streets, and they brought her to the feet of Christ. But Christ, he took the time to even just connect with this woman, and he says, you would if you are without sin, cast the first stone, and everybody just dropped their stones. And they walked away embarrassed, because they themselves are struggling. They had to face their own sins, their own struggles. And yet this woman is at the feet of Christ, and he says, where are your accusers? And she says, none, I see none. He says, I do not condemn you, go and sin no more. And that's the work of Christ, being willing to connect with these people. And the Bible says, whoever causes the downfall of one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for him if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck and he was thrown into the sea. Mark 9:42. We cannot turn people away. We got to work with all people.
Amen.
Dean
I just like to,
Curtis? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just like to say that about 3 weeks ago, I was in on a panel discussion just like this in that originated out of Benton Harbor with the neighborhood organization against racism up there. And that's where that panel discussion went off as kids. We did just fine until we got to the LGBTQ issues. But in my mind, it's a far greater sin to have hardness of heart than it is to than any sexual sin that might be. And I don't consider GLBTQ or LGBTQ sexuality to be sinful.
Yeah, I think that's important is to distinguish what is sin and what is not sin. People can't help who they are attracted to. And so the attraction itself is not, at least in the eyes of our church, Catholic Church, it's not viewed as sin. And I think that we sometimes have to think about where does the LGBTQ IT, I think of IA plus, where do they come from? They come from our families. They come from our community. They are us. And I think a lot of times in the Black community, we seem to sort of gloss over it, like, well, they're not of our church. They're not in our church. They're not in our families. Okay. And that's very hurtful for folks because they are part of our families, they're part of our communities.
Yeah.
And we have to create environments where people can feel welcome. And it means talking about this. It means creating some safe spaces where maybe some folks can talk about it in a way where other people are not, judgmental, whatever it might be. But we have to create those safe spaces. I think there's a lot more that we can do as church to create these opportunities for people to learn more, to talk to each other, and then we can start again, not dehumanizing people, because that's when all sin happens, when we dehumanize. We can sin against the LGBTQ folks much more easily than I think they can sin against us. And when we have to take a look in the mirror sometimes about how we treat people, I think as was said earlier about, the one who is without sin casts the first stone. We're not talking about sin. We're just talking about being loving human beings and welcoming our family.
Well, Charlotte,
Amen.
this is a topic, of course, very close to myself because, as many of you know, Edgar, my late partner, and I came here together as an openly gay man to be the first African-American dean at IU South Bend. And it was a struggle, but we struggled with it. I struggled with it all my life. And I grew up hearing how damaged goods I was as a kid. And you can't, and to be 14, 15 years old and realize that there's something different about you, and to hear people condemn you, they don't even know you. And so many of my friends or people that I've known have grown up with this very poor sense of self-being, of who they are. And the church was not helpful back in the 50s and 60s with helping us to understand this is not something that I chose to do. Nobody would choose this because of the problems that go along with it. However, it was through the church and through my work. And I got my master's in Christian education. I studied every Sunday school literature out there. And it was the Episcopal Church that had the best literature to help me understand who I was. This was back in 1974. And I went forward and struggled with it, but embraced it finally and realized that God loved me regardless and has given me all kinds of opportunities to do that. But I've also had to deal with students who have come to me because they were gay and felt condemned. And their parents condemned them, the church condemned them, but they saw me as somebody that they could talk to. And so many times I had to counsel them and remind them that they were worthy human beings. And the church needs to remember that everybody is a worthy human being. This is not something that, when people say, well, you chose that, trust me, I didn't choose this. Nobody would choose this. But it has not damaged me either. And I've been a very successful dean, a successful educator. And when I came to South Bend, it was the first time that I actually did not hide what I was, who I was. If you knew Edgar, you knew him. Many of you did know Edgar. He couldn't, he was Edgar, that's all I can say. But he provided for me a home. He provided for me a place to be safe. We had great times. People loved him. And when he died in 2014, it was the church, it was my church in particular, that embraced me and embraced him. And the celebration of life was unbelievable.
Oh.
And I will always be grateful to the congregation in St. Michael's for doing what they did for him and for me still. But nobody said, oh, well, he deserved that. No, he didn't. And the church, I believe, has begun to start looking differently at how we are as human beings. It is very hard to be a 16-year-old kid to sit in a congregation and be told by your pastor that you're going to hell because you're gay. Along with the fact that the government tells you you can't serve in the military because you're gay. And the American Psychological Association says you're damaged goods because you're gay. Imagine that at 16. You know, and then what do you tell your parents? Because you don't want them to condemn you either. So I'm glad to see the church is moving in the right direction in terms of embracing people. But again, as everybody has said, ye without sin cast the first stone. And it's important that we look at people as people. I was not looked upon as the gay dean. I was looked upon as the dean. And that worked for me. And that's how I want to live my life.
Amen.
Pastor Thomas, did you have?
I think we have to learn to welcome without being judgmental, to be receptive without being judgmental, and just preach the gospel. It is the work of the Holy Spirit that transforms lives. And God just asks us to put the word out there, and the word won't come back void. And so if we focus on just preaching the word of God, and the word of God, it cuts going and coming. And so just preach and just welcome whosoever will, let him come.
Well, Daryl has the next question, but I do have to say that it's unimaginable for me, and I'm almost 74, I'm proud of that, that Black people of all people would turn their back on someone for being who they are. Nobody knows that better than Black people. And so the Black church, you know, in particular, you just have to, and we are getting better. But I just think really faith community and the Black church and issues like social justice, #MeToo, Black Lives Matter, that includes gay people. And I also have to say, and I will shut up, maybe, but anyway, what about mothers? What about brothers and sisters? What about fathers? What about friends? What about family members who we love our family members? What about us? So, gotta say that. Okay.
Charlie, can I just say one last thing?
Yes.
It was my dad who said to me one day, I was getting ready to come to South Bend, and my dad was in North Carolina where I was at a party that they gave in my honor. And my father looked at me and he said, "What are you going to do with your friend when you go to Indiana?" And I clenched and I said, "Dad, he's going to come with me." And my father said to me, "It's good that you won't be by yourself." And at that point, I understood that he understood what was going on. So, you know, and that made the entire difference. That he and Edgar were great buddies. But my father understood, even though we never talked about it, that I needed somebody in my life like that.
Yes.
And he was just happy that I wasn't going to be alone.
Yep.
And that made my life a whole lot easier, because if my dad accepted me, that was it.
Right.
All that mattered.
Thank you so much, Daryl.
Right on. And I actually want to ask a follow-up question that's kind of closely related to this topic. Many of you know that Indiana is one of only 5 states that doesn't have hate crime legislation on the books. And the big stumbling block for that has been, at least downstate, and I think with some of the Republicans, conservative Republicans, has been that it would give protections to the LGBTQ community. When I first came to South Bend in 2016, the first murder of that year was of Jody Henderson, a Black gay veteran, that we started a long campaign of justice and using his murder, and he was killed because he's gay, to try to push hate crime legislation so that everybody can be protected, and particularly those who've been marginalized and are vulnerable, like we have been as a Black community. So I guess my question is just, do you have any particular thoughts about the hate crime legislation? Is that something you could see you or your church or the Black community getting behind, or just do you have a position on that? And that's really just for anybody.
You have to begin to elect folks to do the right thing. That's the first part. But people also have to understand that LGBT people are not the pariah of society that they've been made out to be. And I think we're getting to see that more and more. When the Supreme Court said you could get married, I was amazed at the number of people that understood what that meant. Because as we said before, all of a sudden, all the uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers who were in the closet were able to come out, and people got to know them better. Also, the science showed that there was differences going on, that some of the old biblical stories we were told, and Ricardo loves when I say that, were not necessarily true to form. And so I think but it's back to politics. We have to put people in office to do what we want them to do. And if the church and congregations don't do that, if they keep electing the same people over and over again, because that's their belief and their belief is that small, we're never going to change. The only reason the bill passed, the COVID bill passed this week, was because people decided they had enough. And people in Georgia really had enough and moved things forward, which allowed us to get what we've got today. And it's amazing to me that many of the Republicans are now claiming, well, I support this part of the bill. So now they want to be a part of the whole thing when they all voted against it. You got to put people in place to make those laws change. And hate crime legislation should not be just for LGBT, it should be for everybody. Hate crime is a crime, period. No matter if you're Black, white, Hispanic, gay, straight, whatever. And that is part of it has to come from putting people in positions of power that will make those changes and not stay stuck in the ways of the past.
I totally agree with Marvin. I think that crime is crime. And that's, once again, the church has to take their right role. We all have different beliefs. We have different theologies and beliefs on different things. But when something's wrong, the church has to stand against what's wrong. If it's wrong against Blacks, if it's wrong against LGBTQ, it's wrong. And we have to stand up against what's wrong. And once, I want to say it like this, Satan is always trying to keep us divided and confused on when we're supposed to speak out. The church have never spoke out on matters that have hurt people. When it came to slavery, the church doesn't speak out. When it comes to crimes like this, the church don't speak out. We have to speak out against those things. And so that calls for all of us. And it's not about them believing in our God, believing in our Jesus. It's not about them coming to our church. It's about us standing for what's right when it comes to society and humanity. We have to fight against things that are wrong. and we allow God to do the rest.
Yes, I agree with Dean Curtis and Reverend Taylor. Yeah, we got to just continue to be the moral voice each and every day, and making sure that all people are treated with dignity and respect.
And
Hey, Charlie,
silence is compliance.
let me say this: Mayor Pete was my friend, okay, and Mayor Pete asked me to go to South Carolina to actually speak for him. Well, in my community, I got jacked up by a lot of brothers that say they love the Lord, but they got confused. It's confusing. Pete Buttigieg was my friend before he came out. He's my friend. That doesn't change our relationship. And so I think that we need to know our right role, and we need to stick to it. And so we're wrong when we're silent, when our friends, when people are being hurt. We're wrong. We have to speak out against those things.
Yes, Reverend McConnell.
Yeah, well, I think I agree with you, Reverend Taylor. But I think one thing we need to keep in mind that in our speaking out against that, we also need to be standing in some kind of acceptance of many people who hold racist ideas, who hold ideas about LGBTQ people. Our conservative brothers and sisters is what I'm getting at, who are not doing this because they're mean-spirited. They're holding these ideas and they're acting these ways because they are afraid. And this is where I think the loving one another, a loving acceptance come in. We need to lovingly accept the racist, the oppressor. At the same time, we also need to speak our truth. And this is hard to do because we also have to suffer with our own fears.
Daryl, I want to go to a passage that I love in the Bible.
Okay.
And Ricardo knows this one. I'm sure all the pastors are the sheep and the goats. You know, the sheep didn't know what they were doing when they were doing the right thing, but they did it. You know, the king will say, you know, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you clothed me. You know, and the sheep always will say, but when did I do that? And Jesus says, what you did for the least of these. And how many times do we ignore the least of these? We qualify the least of these as long as the least of these is what I believe in, rather than the least of these of the world. And that, I think, it's right there. If you read that passage, and if you believe that passage, then you have no choice but to do what's right for the least of these. Because the ghost was sent to damnation because they didn't know. So they said, but they did know. But they chose to turn their backs because it wasn't what they wanted to do. It made them, as Pastor Clark said, it made them feel uncomfortable. But the least of these is all of us. And if we don't do that for the least of these, we'll be in the same spot over and over and over again.
Well, that actually is a good segue to the next question that I wanted to ask when speaking about the least of these. And so some of the most maligned folks in our society at the moment are immigrants. There's been this long attack, certainly over the last 4 years, and before that, I would argue, on immigrants. And the face of our community here in South Bend is changing as well, as more immigrants, particularly from south of our borders, but also from Africa and from other parts of the world, are finding South Bend as home. And what is your church, your denomination, and just kind of your activity in terms of welcoming, supporting immigrants into our community, and what does that look like? And how can we work together to make people feel welcome? And particularly, how can we do that vis-a-vis the church?
I'll say, within South Bend, I've just been there 11 months, but just doing some research. You know, it's a city that it welcomes immigrants, and I'm an immigrant, by the way. You know, I'm from Nassau, Bahamas, and I came to America at age 20 to go to school, and about 2 years ago I became a citizen, and just being a part of this American life has really helped me as a person, and I'm doing my best to continue to help others to be better in society. As I said, you know, I'm a father, I'm an educated man, I'm someone that is fighting for our community each and every day. So when you think of immigrants, you know, immigrants really help strengthen our society. They define who we are, and you know, they help us in our culture with unique skills, you know, that they bring with them. And so, yeah, we got to continue to welcome immigrants.
Before anybody goes, I just want to say congratulations on your citizenship.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jim, and then Marvin.
Yeah, I second that, Pastor Hunter. Congratulations. I think we're very short-sighted with immigration in this country, especially immigration over our southern border. We really need people in this country, and that's one pretty cheap way to get people. And secondly, not only do we need people, but we could help the situation a lot if we pass a meaningful minimum wage. And by meaningful minimum wage, I mean $22 an hour, like it was back, equivalent to what it was back in the 70s. I do volunteer taxes with the VITA folks. And, you know, I see people that work at Walmart and who are being paid not enough to live on. But what most people don't realize is that the minimum wage that we pay entry-level workers is supplemented by government programs like SNAP and Section 8 and other earned income credit. So those people need to live anyway. So basically what I'm saying is that not paying a minimum wage, a meaningful minimum wage, really is a kind of welfare for the very rich, like Jeff Bezos and the Wall family. And so passing a meaningful minimum wage and opening our borders up to more legal ways of becoming citizens would be very helpful to our economy and to our society. We need their creativity and we need their youth.
Paul spoke on division and racism in the scripture when he says there's no difference between the Jews and the Gentiles. And if anybody has listened to me tonight, you're a Christian, you were not, and you wasn't born a Jew, you're a Gentile. So you're an immigrant when it comes to being a child of God. And I'm thankful that God received us. And so we've been called to receive people. We have to stop allowing society to make the church build walls to hinder people from growing. And so that's coming back again, speaking out. Now, I think anybody come to America ought to come to America right, legally. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But we shouldn't hold things against them to stop them from accomplishing the American dream. That's what life's about. It's about giving and making somebody else's life better. I have a saying: the person that beat you giving is the person that beat you living. When you make somebody else's day great, you just make your own life greater. And so you meet people where they're at and take them where they need to go. You never know what that person may do for you later on in life. And so we can't get lost in wrong color. You can't get lost in making decisions about I talk a different language than you. God, people know your heart. When people see your heart, that's what matters. And that's my whole thing about ministry. Just know my heart. If you can know my heart, then we can walk, we can agree to disagree, we can grow together, and we can learn from each other. But that's what the church has to be.
Yeah, that's it, man. That's it. You know, The God we serve, the creator of heaven and earth, he's about setting the oppressed free. That's his
Yes.
work. John 10 talks about the enemy. He wants to kill, steal, and destroy. But Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and live life to the fullest. Not just when you get to heaven, you're going to live life to the fullest. No, even in a broken world,
Talk,
you
preacher.
can live life to the fullest in Christ. And that should be our work as a faith community. We got to continue to look for ways to help people live their best lives in Christ.
Let me put two words out there about immigration: fear and wealth.
Yeah.
Fear and wealth. I lived in California for 6 years, and I saw how immigrants were treated in California. I lived in Stockton, in the Central Valley, which was where a lot of the produce that we eat was grown. Americans did not want to work for $1 a day, but the immigrant population did. And the excuse was, well, if Americans took these jobs, our food costs would go up. Okay, so you hire people, you pay them a substandard wage to keep your food costs down. You hire somebody to do your lawn. Everybody I knew in California had a Mexican lawyer, a Mexican lawn care person that they pay under the table sometimes. But if that person had a child that was going to school, they would object to that because of wealth and power. Because once you amass wealth, you own property, you get to vote, you get to make choices. And the one thing they did not want that to happen was that the immigrant population to amass wealth, to have power, and to make choices. We see it today, where the immigrant population comes in, they amass wealth, but we don't give them any power. We want them to stay subservient so we can amass our own wealth. And that is part of the problem. America is a nation of immigrants. The only people that were here before we got here were the Native Americans, indigenous people. And we know how that went down because we came in as enslaved people, not slaves, but as enslaved people. We know how that went down too. And the dominant society, the white society, used our labor to build wealth and power. And it's the same thing that's been going on. And until we stop that cycle, we're going to look at people from another culture as fearful because they're going to take away what we know to be our own. America was not built by white people. It was built on the backs of immigrants, particularly Black people, who built most of the monuments in Washington. The White House, the Capitol, was built with slave labor. People don't want to acknowledge that part of it. But Black folks built those things. Michelle Obama said it herself. So it's fear and power and wealth are those things that keep this whole discussion going. Because people don't want to give up what they got, what they have, which they didn't really get because of their own work, but for other people's work.
Deacon Tardy.
I think that some of the things that we have to be mindful of when we talk about immigration is that oftentimes politicians in particular want to reduce immigration to one category. They want to reduce it to Mexican immigration. And they use the politics of fear to say, well, they're coming in and they're taking over and they're doing this and they're doing that. And so then they try and criminalize their status here, when really they put them in jail or they put charges against them rather than deport them. They say, well, they're here illegally, you deport them. You don't put them in jail. You don't arrest them. But I think that we have to acknowledge that there are other immigrants. There are immigrants from Africa. There are immigrants from other places that we don't get to hear their stories and see what challenges that they're running into. They also get caught up in some of the politics of fear with misinformation. So a lot of people think that there's a number of folks who are of Latino, Latin American who are in our country, that they're here illegally and that the numbers are growing and all of these things, and not realizing that the numbers in terms of folks coming from Mexico, Puerto Rico, et cetera, have been going down. for years, you know, maybe decades. What's going on is that because we have people here who are American and they're having kids, and the numbers of Latinos are going up because they're here. Okay, but it's being portrayed in the media that they're coming over the border, and that's where those numbers are coming from. Those are homegrown folks. Okay, so we have to be careful that we don't fall into the politics of fear, and that we don't fall for misinformation that allows us to be manipulated by folks who you know, these are things that can keep us divided. And we also have to look at why people may be trying to come here. Some of them are trying to get good opportunities, American dream. Some of them are escaping really horrible situations. And we should provide amnesty. We should provide support. We should be, you know, in the United States, you know, we welcome you're poor, you're tired. I mean, well, we say that when someone's European coming in, but then we close the doors when they're not. We have to be the same with everyone. So I think there's a lot of misinformation about immigration. I think that we fall prey to reducing it to one population. We have to remember that there are other people who have other narratives and other stories. And the more we educate ourselves, the better as church, so that when we have people and they come into our schools or into our communities or into our places of worship, that we're welcoming. Okay, and the last thing I'll say is that out of our Western or out of our African spirituality, we then your ancestors are going to tell God about it, and you know, God's going to let you know that you're doing wrong. Okay, but it's part of who we are in our African spirituality, African American spirituality now, that we welcome strangers. You see that at St. Augustine's. We welcome everybody. That's why people come and they stay, because regardless of whether they're white, or they're Hispanic, or they're Asian American, Asian from Africa, from Haiti, come on in. We welcome you. But that grows out of that African American spirituality.
Thank you. And Pastor Thomas, did you want to add anything?
No, they actually bought them out. I was going to talk about that the education, we just don't know enough, and all these myths out here, and it causes us to shut down instead of welcoming them.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Charlotte.
Well, Pastor Thomas, you said it. Speaking of education, and so number one, Black teachers are retiring and they're not being replaced. Number two, the state of Indiana, but the United States is divesting in supporting public education. Number three, vouchers are going to private schools, and again, not only taking money, but taking the children away from the public schools. And public school, inner city schools, is another word for Black and brown and poor white children. And so I wonder, what is the role of the church for these issues in this matter? Is there a role? And if so, what is it?
The church's role, as far as I'm concerned, is to be the advocate for public education. And once again, I'm back to politics. We've allowed, and as a music teacher, I can tell you this, we've allowed people to dictate what education should be. We've allowed people to decide that Black kids only need this much education. We've allowed people to create tests and exams to keep us out of certain things because we didn't go to the polls and vote, because we did not stand up and we didn't yell out enough. We know the history of this country. I taught at 3 Black colleges, all of them founded either by a church or by ex-slaves, because the education system in the 1800s did not allow us to go. And so many Black colleges were founded because of that reason. We could not get into a school. So in the South particularly, there are these schools, and I taught at 3 of them. And I remember the kids that I taught came less prepared than I did when I was in high school, because the schools they had come from had not prepared them for college. So we spent a lot of time in remediation, but when they graduated, they were up to speed. We know how to educate our children. My mother was up to my elementary school almost every week. When I read Michelle Obama's book about becoming, I thought her mother and my mother had to be related. Because when stuff did not happen for us as children, she and my father were up to that school. As a teacher, it was the parents of the kids I did not see that I wanted to see, because the parents did not take it seriously. We have to reaffirm the fact that we are responsible for the education of our students and for ourselves. We have to stop partying and go to school with our kids. We have to stop buying them $200 sneakers and buy them books and educate them. We know that the system doesn't want us. So what do we have to do? We have to put people in place that will help us get the system that we need. We have to also be the parents who are going to be educated to help our students. And we can't find the education, if we don't have it within us, then find it from somewhere else, whether it's the library, was it too, whatever. But our children's responsibility lies within us. A teacher cannot do it all, but Black folks can do it. We've done it. We've done it for years, but we have to stop giving our kids stuff and educating them instead as to the ways of the world.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did as a church, when we got ready to build our building, some people said, let's build a gym and then we could use it for a sanctuary. We said, no, we was not going to build a gym. We're going to build a sanctuary, and we're going to continue to build facilities that will educate our kids, because the church has to be the institution to help polish kids, bring out the best in them, teach them to read, help them with in every way that's possible. And then with me as a pastor, one thing I asked Dr. Cummings, how come we don't have more African-American males teaching within our community? And he shared with me his answer. But one of the problems we have in South Bend schools, we don't offer African-American teachers contracts on the spot. And so we don't get good African-American teachers here because they're not offered contracts right there on the spot. When other schools, they offer African-American males and females contracts right on the spot. And so we need to spend time with the superintendent. We need to spend time with our children. We need to know our congregation. And when I was growing up, if I struggled in math, there was a math teacher in my church that tutored me after church or tutored me during Bible study. And so we had to get back to doing those things. And then we all had Easter speeches. We messed up in some form, some way, but it taught us how to be public speakers. And so that's the role of the church. The role of the church is really to cultivate our young men and women. When teachers say they can't become, we let them know you can. You can become everything that God wants you to become. And you don't take can't for an answer. And so that's the role of the pastor, the church, that we continue to build African-American kids and teach them, hey, the streets are not a future for you, that there's a reason for education. And so when you bring guys like Marvin around, they see guys like Marvin's polished, that's impressive. And so we need to be open to educate our kids and expose our kids to higher ed at all times. We cannot deny our kids. It's our responsibility. And that's what God wants us. He says for us to be as wise as well as being spiritual sound-minded. So he wants us to be wise stewards.
Yeah. Before the pandemic happened, just coming from St. Louis, as a pastor, I wanted my young people to know that, I'm not just a pastor for them on the day that I worship on Saturday, but also through the week. So many times I would call the parents and say, put me on the visitation list. And I would just call up the school, say I'm coming to see this student. And I didn't show up because there was a problem, but I just wanted my children to know, guess what? I care about your education. And I believe our young people have to see, pastors and religious leaders walk in the hallways you know, that we are paying attention, that we are here to support you in all of your endeavors. I think also that we need to head up culturally sensitive professional development for teachers and staff members, as well as to educate Black families on way to help you know, our children in school as well.
The other part of this, Charlotte, too, is, and this is a sensitive issue, but teaching is not viewed as a profession where you can make money and where you're respected. Too many times I've heard young parents say, well, you know, you don't have to do what the teacher tells you, or will ignore what the teacher says. My dad said to me in 1966, when I was 15 years old, and he said, what do you want to be? I want to be a teacher. And my dad, who had gone to college and graduated from Wilberforce, said, there's no money in teaching. And my comment was, but I want to save the world. And my dad was like shaking his head going, no, this boy doesn't get it right. But he saw it even then in 1966. The average salary of my teachers was like $10,000, you know. And in today's world, we have to start putting value, and again, it goes back to politics. We have to start putting value in education. We have to start putting value in what a teacher does and makes. And I think the pandemic may have shown parents that, you know, while they're at home with their kids, they want their kids back in school because their lives are a mess because kids are usually gone. And now they see what teachers go through. And our teachers have done a great job online, doing these different things, but we have to start putting value. And the church needs to be an advocate for that as well. It goes back to the influence the church has in the world. We have to teach our congregations the value of being a teacher, of being an educator, that this is something to be looked up to. And everybody in our congregation had a teacher at some point that inspired them. We also had teachers that we didn't like, but those same teachers inspired us in some way to be. I had teachers that inspired me to be a teacher. And until we make the teaching profession respected, and the church can do that through its own ways, we're gonna have the same problem. We also have to be advocates for boards of education. Again, tell your congregations, go vote for the school board. Have the school board people come to your congregation and talk about what they want to do. Just don't go into booths blindly, just vote for somebody. Education is the way for our students to get where they are. I was fortunate to be able to teach college, but it's the students I did not see that didn't come to college that I really wanted to get my hands on. I taught elementary school, I taught junior high school, I taught high school. And it was always pushing kids to do better. But I had parents who said to their students, when they got to high school, get a job. Why spend all that money on education? You know, but in today's world, we have to do that. A high school diploma will barely get you a job, maybe get you a job. We know that the jobs of tomorrow are going to require an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree even. We have to put value on education once again, and not listen to folks that cut budgets. The first thing they want to do when they cut a budget is cut arts programs, or cut programs. You know, I'm not a STEM student. I'll say it right now. Science, technology, engineering, and math did nothing for me. I'm an artist, okay? So I wasn't gonna go to a STEM school. We didn't even have it back then. But that's not what my life was about. And so put all that money in that is fine, but what about the rest of us who are artists, who are musicians, who are painters, who are dancers? What happens to us as well? So you look at the whole education process, and we have to advocate for all of our students.
Others? Anyone else?
I think that this is a complicated issue because it's really deep. There's a book that I recommend that folks look at. It's been around for a little bit. It's called The Color of Law. And it speaks about why our schools in 2021 are as segregated or more segregated than they were in the 50s and the 60s. Because of housing policies, systemic racism with housing policies that intentionally drew whites out of the inner cities into what were being created suburbs through government subsidies, and then moved the factories and the jobs out as well, so that the economic infrastructure was no longer there for people who remained, who were discriminated against, that they could not get into these suburbs and could not accumulate wealth. So as we're talking about, whether it's public schools or it's private schools, the fact of the matter is that we are at a disadvantage regardless of what school we're in, because of systemic racism, because the resources are not there, because wherever we're at, Black and brown folks are more likely to be sent to the principal's office, more likely to be suspended, more likely to be expelled, less likely to be called upon, less likely to be told, hey, you can go to a place like Notre Dame, or you can go to a place like Morehouse, you can go to wherever. There's a lot there, and we can do some window dressing, but we have to look at the underlying policies that create the disparities that the pandemic has brought to the surface in some ways, that we have to address the systemic racism in housing, in education, for us to be able to say things where we as a community have some control over the resources. We're not allowing other people to educate our kids where they feel bad about themselves, but they will be educated by folks, regardless of their background, that lift up our folk, that see them for the promise that they are. But we really have to dig deeper. We don't have time right now, but we really have to dig deeper. The last thing I'll say is that we've got to reestablish our relationship with our youth. Our churches have to make sure that we adults and grandparents and whoever might be love our children again, and not fall into this, I'm afraid of my kids, I'm afraid of the kids. And we build up walls, and they realize that people don't trust them at a young age. And so we have to be able to do that, and we have to make sure that when they get to third grade, up until third grade, they learn how to read. They learn how to read, and after third grade, they read in order to learn. If we can't get our kids, and the churches can do a lot with this, we can't get our kids to read by third grade, the rest of the journey is going to be uphill. And we have to be able to share those sort of values, that sort of wisdom with each other, to understand that there's a lot that needs to be done when we're talking about education in our community.
Well, thank you, everyone. We have a lot of questions. And Daryl, is it okay if we go to questions, or is there something more you'd like to say?
No, that's exactly where I was going to go.
So we have a lot of questions coming in, and Barbara Williams is going to sort through the questions and give our speakers, and I don't know if we want other people, but at least our speakers, a chance to comment on those questions. Barbara?
So early on, we had questions from Sharon about anyone performed a church service for police officers at the station. And that was a suggestion she made. And she also brought up the issue of whether Black and white congregations could adopt each other and move toward people knowing more and having more dialogue between traditionally white and Black congregations. So I'll bring those two things to the fore here.
Yeah, I think collaboration is important. I think we accomplish more when we work together, and that's why I'm happy to be a part of Faith in Indiana. We are out there, people who believe in God, people who don't believe in God, just working together to make our community a better place, healthy, and a safe place. So, collaboration is important.
I think not only collaboration, but hearing each other. When we, rather than, for example, if Black Lives Matter comes on, there are people who will immediately turn it off and say, I don't want to hear those people. Those people. We have to start listening. You know, if I have to listen to the far right, then you should be able to listen to the left. You know, I mean, I listen to see what's going on, but you know, again, it's about fear. I think we sometimes fear what we don't know because it's not what we are used to, and we have to start listening, not talking at each other, but listening more and more. And the church has a big role in that. It would be wonderful to have ecumenical services, you know, where people come together to talk. But you know, it's not only that, it's just having a meal sometimes with somebody. It can change a person's life as you sit and talk with them. And so, you know, I'm hoping that at St. Michael's, we have a thing called Service on Saturday, where once a month before the pandemic, they offered a free lunch to people. It didn't matter who it was, come in and have lunch. I think now they're giving away food packages on a particular Saturday, but getting to know people, getting to talk with them, see what their needs are. And you begin to break down those walls and those barriers over food, just talking about what goes on in your own life. And I think the church needs to do more of that. We need to have dialogue. But as King used to say, 11 o'clock is the most segregated hour in America.
Right. And
know?
it still is. It still is.
Yeah, I mean, that's what, you know, I walked into St. Michael's as a Black man into an all-white church, and I thought, okay, what's going to happen? I was embraced, you know. Beth North came up there and gave me this big old hug, and people, you know, nobody looked at me like, why is he here? But how many times does that not happen? How many times do people walk in our church and we say, who is that? And treat them as a stranger in the house of God? And I'll be quiet now.
One of the other questions that Beth raised was, are any of the churches affiliated with Spelling Bee Explosion, Corey Brazier and William Douglas, and Gentlemen and Scholars Etiquette classes? Apparently, these people met together at a South Bend church and began these programs. Does anyone have any comments about those programs?
I can say it was in Pastor Ricardo Taylor's church. Mount Carmel Church is where it started, is where they are. So I can
Okay.
for Mount Carmel.
Okay. And then when we moved to the issues of the LGBTQ, we had several comments, such as Deborah's comment that it's not up to me to judge others, that church doctrine, Cheryl said that church doctrine and LGBTQ may not agree on the marriage equality issue, but they still can make, churches can still make church statements about striving for equality and other issues for LGBTQ. And then Deb asked again, can the church teach God created us all? How can a church teach God created us all equal in the image of God except certain people? And how can being human be a sin?
Can I just say, as a student of church history, because I studied that, church doctrine is a real interesting concept. We have all these denominations because somebody got mad and took their marbles and started their own church. That's a simplistic way of putting it. So doctrine depends on where you are. And there's a doctrine. I grew up in the Methodist Church in Chicago. I've played for AME churches. I played for Catholic Church. I played for Episcopal Church. I played for Baptist Church. I've been to various services around the country. And church doctrine is as varied as people are. But church doctrine is based upon what man has decided it to be, rather than what God decided it should be. God gave us 2 commandments: love him and love your neighbor. That's the church doctrine. But we have decided to make other things along with it. You know, unless you're baptized by immersion, you're not correct. In some churches, unless, you do this, that, the other. And I think we have to stop doing, we have put God into a box to fit our own needs sometimes, rather than letting God be free to do what God does. And so church, if you look at church history, which most of us don't do, you'll see how church doctrines got put together. And it's usually somebody's idea, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I want. And if you follow me, then this is what it's going to be. And that's the doctrine. And the doctrine becomes a human thing, a man-made thing, rather than a God-made thing. And so I think we really need to examine what the church doctrine says, and what it is, who created it, why, which means that we have to question sometimes the church itself. We all know that in the days of slavery, many churches owned slaves and sold them for missionary projects. Church did that. The AME church started because a Black man was preaching and he knelt in the church. They told him he had to go to the balcony, and he left. Richard Allen started the AME church out of that. I mean, so there's always, so we have to start looking at that historical part that we sometimes accept. We go into a church and we accept their doctrine, but is that doctrine really sound about what God wants us to do? And I think that's another part of how the church has to sort of change. It is changing, that it can't be static anymore. At one time there was only one church. The Pope had authority. Well, and he was supposed to be infallible. Well, we all know that's not true. No man is infallible, but in some cases, we've allowed the church to dictate our norms, which is the norms for that particular person, rather than for what God wants us to do. I'll be quiet now, Charlotte.
One of the questions, and I think Jim McConnell would agree with me, as I'm a Unitarian Universalist, is that the Unitarian Universalists don't have any doctrines. We have guiding principles. So just to bring that up. One of the things that, moving on to the issues regarding LGBTQ, is how can the church be involved in teaching us all more about human sexuality and not teach us to hate ourselves? Do any of your churches have any teachings or education? And I know Jim's raising his hand because the Unitarian Universalist started a whole program called OWL, Our Whole Lives. And we've been working with our own youth on teaching human sexuality in our congregations. What about any of the rest of you?
I believe St. Michael's has, our pastor does that with the youth as well. And that's a touchy subject for a lot of people because they don't want to talk about it.
Well, a lot of families don't talk about it. Our
Exactly.
schools are sometimes prohibited for talking about it.
Yeah.
But the legislators say, well, the schools can't do it. Maybe we should have our churches and parents do it. Parents say that they don't know how to do it. And that's why our church took up the mantle and said, we're gonna work on this many a year ago.
I think it's important. Let me just add to that. It's a touchy subject. And I think as faith leaders, we got to avoid making assumptions about the sexual orientation or gender identity of any of our members, guests, or children, and be open to take challenges to assumptions that you do make. And it's important for, as a pastor, as a church, that we take the time to ask and then always respect each person's identity or their self-labels, pronoun preferences. So that's something that we ought to continue to educate.
Jim, did you have your hand up and want to say something?
Yeah, I did. Actually, it's my opinion that the whole church is hung up on sex. That we have made the sexual sins, are we made what we consider to be deviant sexuality sins, when in fact there are a whole raft of human behaviors that are far more damaging to the human spirit than indiscriminate sexuality, for instance. And I would say hardness of heart is one of those. And that's all I have to say on that topic.
And I think that just a brief comment on some of the things that the Catholic Church has been doing regarding theology of the body and sort of redeeming the body, that you can talk about the body, you can talk about sexual intimacy and realizing that these are all gifts from God. And so to not talk about it is to deny a gift from God, and to not lift it up for the beauty that it is to deny a gift from God. So we need to start to develop the language to have these sort of conversations, particularly with our young folks. But I think that there's not enough time to go into it here, but I think that we need to do more of that sort of thing.
Okay, moving on to the issue of immigration. The one thing that was brought up is that the churches need to educate about truth on immigration. Are white immigrants who overstay their visas being arrested by ICE at the same levels as Black and brown people? Can the churches be outraged more about the treatment of minors and families that are crossing the borders? And then Cheryl pointed out that immigration doesn't lower wages for Americans, but multiple studies have shown that raising the minimum wage to a reasonable amount would make us more welcoming in our communities. Any comments on this?
I just think it's a crime that the minimum wage has not been raised since 2009. It's $7.50 an hour, which is about $15,000 a year, if I'm right. And even at $15 an hour, it becomes about $30,000 a year. And for people in Congress to say it's going to affect the economy is just craziness. But we keep putting those people back in office. We keep re-electing them. And that is part of the problem. Can you imagine if certain members of Congress were not re-elected, how things would change? The mentality that somebody that makes $174,000 a year, which is what a congressman makes, begrudges somebody for making $7.50 an hour. That's a crime right there. That's sin. You don't want to talk about sin. But the fact that we allow that by putting these people back in office, we allow that to happen. There's no reason why our sitting congressman right now, in South Bend, makes $174,000 a year, and she voted against the COVID bill. Why? She voted against people getting help. She'll probably vote against the raising of the minimum wage. And the excuse will be, well, businesses, people will lose their jobs. Too many people don't have jobs right now. The economy is still in free fall. And what would making people's lives better hurt anybody? But that this fear of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that's outrageous. It can't be outrageous. $7.50 an hour doesn't do anything for you. That might pay your rent a year. But we have to start looking at people and their needs And the church needs to help fight that. And the best way, one of the best ways is for us to help people to vote I won't say correctly, to vote for the values that we uphold. If we believe in the gospel, then we need to put people in power that also do what the gospel says for the least of these, not to keep their line in their pockets with money.
Jim, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that one thing we haven't talked about yet tonight is that if you view society as a kind of organism, you see that, at least it seems apparent to me that the people that are making the low wages and are many of whom are Black people, are really serving a function, and that function is to be a scapegoat for many middle class and upper class people, because it's important to a person who's scapegoating someone else that they actually do perform poorly. So they can just point at, say, a person who's making $7.50 an hour and say, well, if they just had better judgment, they'd be okay. And the thing is, if they hadn't made bad decisions, or if they worked a little harder, but all that scapegoating, all that is just people downloading a lot of their darkness onto other people. And it's unfortunate that in our society that a lot of that psychological load is being offloaded onto, well, poor people and Black people.
Well, a lot of that has to do with, trying to, cheap labor. I mean, a lot of the things that we're talking about with immigration, and we didn't get into prison reform, but when you look at mass incarceration, you read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, you can see that a lot of these things are done because it's legalized slavery. And so when people don't have the power, the social power to do anything to change this, they become victims of it, and so that's what we're seeing. And as you pointed out, a lot of people who get caught up in it are either Black or brown folks, and our nation has this history where it's been doing this since the Native Americans, and trying to take advantage of people. That's the sort of thing that we need to really start addressing as well.
One of the I'm not a Christian, I'm a humanist, but one of the things religious symbols I really admire is, Deacon Tardy, is the Christ on the cross, because that symbol invites us to bear our own humanity, to bear our own darkness, and that requires suffering. So in a way, a lot of the problems that we are dealing with today are just the refusal to suffer our own humanity. And so I like very much that particular symbol, as I also like the symbol of the yin yang, the circles of darkness intertwined with one another. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we really need to rework the U.S. Senate. I mean, I have to tell you that about 27% of the population has about 50% of the power in the U.S. Senate, and it's not representative government at all. And it's actually a lot of that power comes from states that are poorer and more prone to sickness, more prone to obesity. In other words, people that are not as healthy are make as much as people. And I know I'm not sounding very good in this, but in other words, we're represented by people who aren't representative of most of us. Aren't representing most of us. Yeah. And the U.S. Senate is one of the worst places that we have in our.
Yes.
I'm going to move us along because we're getting close to our time limit. We have 10 minutes left. Sorry, Marvin.
Okay,
the next issue is, of course, education, and I don't want to leave that out. One of the themes coming through was the legislation that's currently being considered in our Indiana legislature and in many other places as well, that would prohibit the full inclusion history and keep us stuck into a Eurocentric indoctrination of what history is. That was not brought up previously, and I'd like to hear some comments on that.
Could you say that one more time? Repeat that.
There's legislation that's before many legislatures, including the one in Indiana, that is prohibiting full inclusion history and is keeping us stuck into a Eurocentric view of history, because that's where much of the history written by white men has been for decades.
The
And
problem was,
hundreds of centuries, actually.
the problem was the backlash against the 1619 Project.
Right,
And
exactly.
so, and the former president, of course, was trying to redo all that because history is his story. And his story does not include the truth story.
Right.
As I tell people, George Washington was the father of our country, but he also had 600 slaves. The first five presidents, 4 of them were slave owners. That part is not part. I learned about George Washington chopping down the cherry tree and didn't tell a lie. I didn't learn about the slavery issue till I was an adult, or the Columbus, all those different things. And so when you change history, people begin to look different. And so the laws are being designed to make sure that students are indoctrinated with what people want you to know rather than what you should know. And we have to fight against that, you know. But again, it's about the legislature.
Well, I think that one of the things that comes up from this is, I don't think people realize how intentional these efforts to suppress narratives have been, as they have been in the last 4 years under the previous administration. You can see that it's not just an accident or ignorance or we didn't know any better. It's an intentional attack across the board to say that this is the narrative that we want people to have. And that's not a healthy narrative, and that wasn't even true. But that's the sort of thing that we have to realize is part of the battle. That's the battle. And when we are ignorant of that, we stand to lose a lot.
Yeah, I think it's important that we begin to retell our own story, you know. That's very, very important. And also, just going back to what Curtis was talking about, yeah, we have to hold our senators, congresswomen and men accountable, and encourage our members, our family members, our neighbors. When you see these bills coming out like that, we need to call, we need to write, we need to send a text like, no, vote against this. We're not for this. Our community, we stand against this stuff, and we want to make sure that our children receive the best education. And so they get to hear from us, and so they just can't hear or we just vote for every 4 years. Things are happening every day, and we got to really educate our community about that. That you got to be voting for the superintendent. You got to be hearing their message. You got to be, when it comes to judges or all these local elections, you got to be a part of the community. Be your voice. Your voice is important, and so that's what I'll say to that.
I want to say that this is not new, that Indiana University once passed a ruling that Howard Zinn's book about an alternative view of history was prohibited from being used in any of the Indiana University classes. And as a response to that, many of the historians at Indiana University would read his book all night long as a filibuster. And Charlotte, I know, remembers that time, but I think it precedes the other people on the panel from Indiana University. But that was something that was done in Indiana probably 30, 40 years ago, Charlotte? Yeah. Okay, that kind of concludes. We had many positive responses that they appreciated having this forum, that bringing people together, they encouraged churches to work together. And I think Faith in Indiana is one of the vehicles that is trying to do more of that. But I think in my experience, just having some dialogue and sharing of viewpoints is really important. And that came through from everybody who was signing off early as well as throughout the chat. And I will send it back to Daryl.
Great, thank you, Barbara. And thanks to all of the panelists. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for including us in this conversation. This is one of many things that we'll continue to do along the way because, I mean, as Barbara said, and as many of you have alluded to, being able to talk together is an important step in building the world and transforming it to what we want it to be. Any last words, Charlotte?
Well, I just want to thank everyone again. And I just want to restate that the only difficult conversation is the conversation we don't have.
Great. And with that, have a wonderful night, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Daryl.
Take care.